the Toronto Star. I'm Sabayat Azaz, and this matters. Yesterday, the last US soldier left. All the planes took off, the West turned away from Afghanistan, and countless Afghans were left with their hopes and their life's work undone. After 20 years of war by the US and its allies to topple the Taliban, the troops have withdrawn, leaving Kabul once again back with the Taliban. The previous Taliban rule was a dark period, especially for Afghan women and minorities. Not to say that the years in between have been any easier, dealing with internal politics, corruption, militia violence, and US airstrikes. But Afghans still continued to rebuild, and they're now losing it all. Ali Raza Yesa is one of them. He's lived in Afghanistan for more than 20 years and opened schools all across the country. He left a few months ago, never imagining that he would never be able to go back and that home might become unrecognizable. He is Hazara Shia, a community that was among the most persecuted groups during the last Taliban rule. Reports of attacks, torture, and killings of Hazaras are continuing. He joins me on This Matters, and we talk about his life in Afghanistan and his lifetime of work on education that will remain unfinished for now. Hello, Ali. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for having me here.
Ali, I want to start with some personal reflections on your part. You were there in Kabul until a few months ago. What was the atmosphere like there? Were you surprised or not by what subsequently went down?
To be honest, we were all kept in a big shock of surprise, anger, sadness. And this was the most difficult thing in life. I mean, everything seemed to be working somehow until it was no more.
Did you leave because of the situation getting a bit tense there when you went away a few months back? Or were you not expecting that this entire shift would happen so radically while you were away? Because obviously the fighting and the conflict was ongoing since the beginning of this year.
It wasn't only since the beginning of this year. I have two important things to share. One of the things is Biden continually say that, well, the Afghans didn't fight, the Afghans didn't fight. It's not that the Afghans didn't fight, the president didn't fight. We have lost more than 70,000 Afghan troops who gave their ultimate sacrifice. So where were they lost? They were lost in battlefields. They were lost in the war. So it's wrong to say that the Afghans didn't fight. We have been fighting. I mean, whoever had a role of significance, they did their best to help the country modernize. I mean, including myself, for the past 20 years, I have been working day and night, sleeping 3 hours and working 16 to 20 hours every day in order to keep these schools running. And because of that, I was suffering from some health issues. The reason I was coming back and forth between US and Afghanistan was the health complications. And just until this few months ago, where I had to go through some kind of serious medical attention, we never knew things would so swiftly change dramatically and everything would be radically changed. And of course, it was very organized, unfortunately, and the president left everything to his tribe. In a sense, I can say, definitely to his tribe. I have a lot of Pashtun friends in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, everything is broken through the line of ethnicity. The Hazara generals last year and the year before were disqualified, despite the fact that they hadn't reached the age of retire. More than 35 generals were told to stay home and never come out, and that they were forced to resign. So it was kind of racial systematic discrimination against all the other ethnic groups. In Afghanistan, you have the Pashtuns, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, and the Hazaras. All the other three tribes were marginalized to the last point, to a point that the president would go province to province and would give order for the battalions, for the whole core of army to give up and to surrender. And this was coming. We did know this was coming, but not so ugly to this point, because the president kept saying Kabul would not give up, Kabul would not give up, and he's kept robbing people's salary.
This conversation is very much about what you're talking about Afghans like you who've invested in building the nation. And you're talking about schools that you opened all across Afghanistan, right? Tell me a little bit more about those schools. What were you doing in terms of education there?
When I first came to Afghanistan, it was 2002 and 2003, between these 2 years. It was the time when the old money, which was worthless, was being burned in big piles. and the new money bills were being printed. And around that time, people were extremely poor. So I shifted my school from Quetta, Pakistan, to Kabul, Afghanistan. It's a series of language centers because I did know the importance of knowing English language. So I opened schools with very minimum equipment. Some people were sitting on the bare floor without any chairs or anything. And we were charging students $1 a semester. A semester was for 3 months, and we're teaching them 6 days a week, except Fridays, which were off. And this gained a lot of fame and attraction to us. And we, in a sense, played a role in social and economic mobility in the areas where we were operating, because we started with only charging $1, and we reached from 150 students to 13,000 students. And at one time, I had 13,000 students only in 2 schools. So in the past 20 years, my immediate family members, my 2 sisters and 3 brothers did, and parents, everybody had a role, and we were like a family who were trying to reach out and help our students learn the language and take part in the social and economic mobility in the country and be absorbed and hired by international organizations. And at the beginning, this was the whole scenario. And then after that, we, without getting any single penny in the past 20 years of donation or support from government or from international organizations all across the country, I opened 17 schools, all of them called Star Educational Society. And we graduated over 64,000 students. 64,173 students got graduated until 28th of August of 2020. Last year. And we contributed to success of over 100 Fulbrighters who came to US to study. I mean, Afghanistan being one of the youngest country in terms of the age, 65 to 70% of the population of the country was under the age 30. It was the reason people wanted to study, people want to learn. People wanted to become something and take a role in society. They wanted to become doctors, they wanted to become engineers. They wanted to find a way to better life and reach their dreams. So English language was extremely, extremely helpful for them. And that's how they would be able to use internet. They would be able to use their smartphones. We reached as far as the farthest areas of Daikundi, which is a province that's totally underprivileged with hundreds of thousands of people who do not even have electricity. So we reached even to those villages where people could not earn $1 a day. So the whole reason for reaching those areas was to take part and help people.
We'll be right back. What is the situation now, Ali, with these schools? You mentioned that they were co-educational as well. What do you see as the future of this setup? Is it running right now?
Well, it's like a bitter pill to swallow. I mean, difficult to explain how things are. Despite all the problem the Taliban would impose on the general public, we would all try to have our unions and talk to them. First, we were told that we could open the schools in 2 weeks. And then after that, now we are told that we are not allowed to open schools in 3 months. And just last night, they announced that universities will be girl and boy separate. So same is the case with our schools. Our language centers are blamed to be more modern than the universities. Why? Because people come and study for 1 hour and in order to practice their English. They believe in different kind of lifestyle. And in the meantime, they also have discussions in English language where they discuss about certain things which are apparently kind of sensitive. And they use their freedom of speech, of course. And then given these kind of circumstances, I'm not very sure when we would be able to open. Many of my rival schools with the same kind of mission in Afghanistan have already been shut down and their furniture have been sold out. 3 years ago, when I had a school in Ghazni province, and we were getting fame and recognition, when the Taliban invaded Ghazni for the first time, people were thrown down from the top of the school. So they had some kind of wild way of punishing people. So I was never able to reopen that school for the past 3 years. We don't know what's going to happen in Kabul. We're not sure. And very unfortunately, my teachers and students, many of them have lost hope.
I was going to ask you about that because we've talked about it before, and I see from your timestamps, you're pretty much on Kabul time. You are talking to people on ground. What kind of conversations are your students and your colleagues and other teachers having with you right now?
People are very scared. They're extremely scared. Day by day, as the Taliban spread more control, you see nuances of change in their behavior. Every day they do something that's in contrary to the human rights, in contradiction to normal way of life that people have. Just recently, the Taliban have, in different areas of Kabul, they have entered their houses. Whoever has a better car, the car has been taken out from them. People have been arrested for unknown reasons. They've been questioned and things like that. The bodyguards of different government officials who used to work for the previous government, they have been molested. They have been questioned. They have been even tortured. And some of my friends and students cannot even say where they are. They don't trust anyone, including anyone from this part of the world who talks to them. It seems that people are extremely scared, let alone how women feel. The women's no area of work for them in Afghanistan. They don't believe the teachers. They don't believe they will be able to resume their jobs. Female teachers have already given up. They think they cannot teach anymore. And yeah, life is pretty much going on outside of the houses. People very much want to be inside house, but how long can they stay? They don't know where to find food. Some of them are running out of their cash money, so they don't even have enough money to buy a piece of bread, So it's a very dire and extremely sensitive and hostile situation.
Ali, you spent more than 2 decades in Afghanistan. I want to know, it's a broad question, but what was life like over the past 2 decades? And also, you have some lived experience with the previous Taliban rule and the insurgency as well, right? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Maybe there was a time in Afghanistan or in Kabul where we see the pictures from Zaire Shah time or a time before that where people had some level of freedom. But these 20 years were very life. Why? Because we had hundreds of people who were highly motivated, be it schools, be it universities, or wherever they were extremely motivated. People wanted to bring change. They wanted to work. They were compliant. They did have complaint about how the government was treating them, including myself. My schools were several times punished for late payment of the taxes and things like that. They would put restrictions on our programs from time to time. The government was extremely corrupt. You just bribed them so that they wouldn't come back to you. But still, there was a way to life. People were extremely happy. How would 60,000 students get educated and get to learn English language and graduate from a single school of mine? And I'll compare it with where else they could get out from society. But unfortunately, the government was definitely very, very corrupt. People did complain about how, for example, for no reason, sometimes they would face corrupt government officials and that they had to pay a lot of bribe to get away with something. I mean, in my schools, we did pay a lot of tax, but we didn't have any support, any special support from the government. For example, in the recent 2 years where the security got worsened, for every security guard, we had to pay $800 to the government per month in order to keep one security guard. Now, guess what? And that they would decide which school needs how many security guards. And so we couldn't abide by the law of the government. Of course, we could not keep 10 security guards and pay, guess what, $8,000 per month for the security only. So what we did, we would have cameras, we would have security cameras, and we would hire our own guards, but they would not be armed. But we weren't able to defend ourselves. I mean, if several times in my neighboring schools, there were explosions, suicide attacks, nobody could save anyone. What was happening was happening,
So from what I understand, it seems that obviously there were issues with corruption, there was violence over the past 2 decades, and yet a lot of Afghans, including you, say that there were still more opportunities compared to the experience, for example, with the previous Taliban rule, right?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Now the fear is very serious. People have lost their hopes. From every 10 friends on Facebook and other media, at least 9 of them are asking one question. Do you have a way to show us to come out of the country?
What are your hopes and dreams for the students of your school and for Afghanistan in general? And do you have hope that we might see them fulfilled in our lifetime?
We're totally hopeless. We just hope our people are safe. That's the last and the first thing that comes to mind. We just really, really hope that nothing happens to them physically, although they are emotionally and spiritually, they are so much hurt. We just wish that they are safe and they're not taken from their homes and tortured and killed for the things that they had no freedom to choose. For example, being a Hazara or a Shia in a country into 20% of its population, Hazaras, now that's the only hope we have. I don't think Taliban have changed, and I don't think their promises make any sense, because they promise that there is general amnesty and everybody has been forgiven. But you see, just this past week, 14 Hazaras were killed in Daikundi, 9 Hazaras were killed the week before that in Herat. So we keep hearing how people get killed. And when people see these, they don't want to stay. They want to move out. They know Taliban lie. They have always lied. They just want to find some level of international recognition. They will once again change the country into a safe haven for international terrorism. That's what we know for sure. And for minority, there is no hope. And for women activists, of course, they are not safe.
But Ali, also at the same time, Afghanistan was home for you for 2 decades. Do you see a way back one day to the homeland you helped build?
Well, to be honest, we feel deluded. We feel deceived. Both the US and the Afghan government, they both have deceived us. So we don't see a way back. We have a lot of emotional connection to the houses, the places, the gardens, the areas where we built brick by brick. But all our wishes have dried up and have withered away. I don't see a way to go back to the country under the flag of Taliban. If there's a coalition government, if there's a way to bring change and marginalize Taliban, which does not seem to be predictable, I would definitely go back. But with this Taliban, they're so sweet in words and so harsh in behavior. I am not seeing a way to go back. I have my relatives and family members that they're trying to go out of the country and they can't. It's more like surviving level, Everybody is turned against everybody.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with me, Ali. I know you've been exhausted and really busy. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And apologies if I wasn't so consistent, because emotionally, like every other Afghan, and psychologically, we feel very unsafe and we feel like a nervous breakdown, to be honest. We all feel panic.
I can understand. Thank you. I was talking to Ali Raza Yesa, an Afghan educator and founder of the Star Educational Society, a network of world languages schools across Afghanistan. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, Sabai Tazaz. The This Matters team is Adrian Chung, Brian Bradley, JP Fozo, Matt Hearn, Morgan Bucknick, Raju Mutter, and Sean Pattenton. Our music is by So-Called, Mike DeAngelis, and Sean Pattenton. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com/subscribingmatters. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.